procedure. Okay.
Eileen Spusha of Leiden University. You referred to the fact that discussion in the WTO in the TRIPS Council is blocked with regard to enforcement of intellectual property rights. And I assume that you referred to the EC proposal to the TRIPS Council in the mid-90s, in which developing countries disagreed with the fact that the TRIPS Council has a mandate to review enforcement on the ground. So, in my view, this is about unclarity about the scope of obligation to enforce intellectual property rights on the ground. So my question is, to what extent does the ACTA clarify this in that sense that to what extent does it lay down other benchmarks than in the TRIPS agreement? And what is the added value of the ACTA if developing countries or countries in development like China do not join the negotiations, and is there a strategy to induce them to join the agreement?
First question of Baroness Watford, why not such a broader public support? Well, I'm hardly neutral on the issue, so I wonder, because it's a very good question that you're asking, because there is indeed concern in this very Parliament. I've been asked to speak several times at the request of groups on counterfeiting. I know it's a concern, it's a topic that's concerning several MEPs. But why so much fuss about the Internet aspect of ACTA? I do not know. I do not make the fuss. I'm trying to dispel the myth. So I'm afraid. Mismanaged? Well, the problem is you can call it mismanagement. You can call it differently. I mean, if systematically what you say is not believed, is transformed, is misspelled, etc., I mean, the only thing you can do is to be as transparent as possible, and I hope we're going to have success on this, and that the negotiating text will be available for the public, so we are beyond simply making them available for INTA or chairman, etc., and that everybody will see by himself. But I take your point that perhaps we should be better communicator or whatever, but we are dealing with a situation which has gone, as I said often, mythological. There are myths on this issue. Mrs. Mann has asked about whether the industry will have access. I think here again we are beyond that. We are asking now for full transparency for the public because we think that's the only solution. So I think it's kind of overtaken by events. I think it would have been a good question, although if industry had that access, I had to justify that only the industry can have access and not citizens or consumers, etc., and then we would get into this kind of debate, and then eventually what's the difference between some citizens and not wider public, so that's not easy. The lady asked about what I meant by WTO blocked agenda. I was actually referring to not the mid-90s. I was referring to much more recent experiences of this year, of last year, of the year before, where systematically we are faced opposition to put enforcement on the agenda. And I take the point that, of course, it would be an ideal situation if the countries which are the largest source of counterfeit would be around the table. I think to induce them, to quote your own word, to induce China, I think is not exactly on the agenda. I don't think anyone induces China. But it is to be hoped, and I have no clear, of course, crystal ball on this, but it is to be hoped that a number of countries will see this as progress. Perhaps not. But this is the only solution that we have for the time being, is to start make examples of certain countries willing to go forward and hope that others will join. But there will be no inducement, and of course there is no guarantee of success. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those answers. So, since we're already running late, just one short respond, Mr. McNamee. Yes, it was no, just to your question. Yes, we know what we did, and and we meant it that way. And then I know that Dr. Geist also is requesting to respond.
Just quickly, I must say that I feel like I'm the bearer of bad news here, because you've said several times that you think your life will be easier once the text is released. And hearing you speak, and I believe what you say, I actually think that that's now not the case, because you can look at substantive provisions that I put forward and say they're not substantive. You can take a look at a three strikes footnote, admittedly a footnote, and say that it's not there. I mean, frankly, if there's a myth here, I don't think it's happening from this side of the House. But what I do think it is that there are clearly people looking at text and seeing two totally different things. And so even when this text is released, I fear that it is not going to make your life any easier at all. And in many respects, I think what it's doing is undermining the credibility and stoking the fear that you're hearing amongst many elected representatives.
Just to clarify, it will make my life as EU easier. I'm not saying it's going to make the life of everybody around the table of ACTA, and I don't have to comment the position of the other parties. What I say is that the EU is defending exclusively its legislation, and I know that is the reality, and you will not be able of proving me the contrary. Thank you.
Okay, I hope you will take the time afterwards at the reception also to go intensively into in-depth. But as I said, we're running a little bit late, and I'm very happy now to introduce Stefan Kravchik from eBay to get a perspective of basically what would it mean for private business, and especially for a company dealing a lot with goods which would have to protect themselves and their customers from